5. Fantastic.
Oh.
I don't know, I'm still having a slight issue. Fantastic. Okay. Actually, is it cool if I just keep push to talk off?
Sure.
Alright, great. It's easier. Okay, we're in, we're good. Actually, the first thing just came in. It's not really a question. Somebody said in chat, we believe that the dungeon will not leave players feeling obligated to use a Discord server to stand a good chance. Spore, is that like a question or something, or not really sure about that one? Okay, let's find a server real quick to play on. Will UT crafting have a penalty to it? Yeah, it's actually something that people want to know for a while. Will UT like exchange have to use fame and gold on it, or fame and gold, or something like that? Something like how you feed pets.
Yeah, it'll probably be a pretty similar system. We're still working out the exact details in terms of what it takes to forge an item each time. But yeah, there will be some system along those lines.
All right. That works. Since Purity won't purify anymore, will there be reworked status effects like sick, weakened, days, etc.? I propose the status effect cooldown, like how enemies in the future can get stunned, but cannot get stunned for 3 seconds.
So on this one, we believe that it's more on a case-by-case basis on how those specific effects are used, and it's something I'm sure many people as in the LX are working on tweaking a lot of status effects. I think one of the big ones, for example, we're doing is kind of in the early game, in the mid game, replace a lot of the quiet into silence, since it's essentially a weaker version of that effect. I think in the future we may look into more weaker versions of effects, less drastic versions of effects, and introduce them in places where that makes sense. Because, for example, weak basically destroys your entire DPS. It's not really a middle ground there, so it'd be nice for us to have a bit more options on that front. But currently, we're going to be doing more case-by-case basis. Also slightly unrelated, but which server are you on?
I'm currently in USO 2, but I'm gonna look for a more populated server, so we aren't left with like a run with like 2 people in it. I'm gonna go USS 4 instead. Next question is, will anytime soon the items in Nexus be sold for fame or anything like that with like the upcoming fame rework, or are they gonna be gold permanently?
We're actually working on something like that for
Yep.
Monthly Mad God, so
Oh, very
look forward
nice.
to this.
It's funny, we saw someone on Reddit pretty much saying that exact same thing. We're kind of chuckling to ourselves because that's already the plan of implementation.
Real quick off topic. I'm in USS 4 Mummy, by the way. Are you planning to expand the storyline of existing dungeons? The lore for Abandoned Mineshaft seems incomplete and could really do some expansion. Perhaps a chance to kill that foolish dwarf who cares only about himself.
Oh.
So I've always thought the dwarf was a bit greedy. Just asked you about a year ago for a lot of contribution, and it didn't really give you much in return, right? Still a lot of your hard-earned quest marks and all of that. So the Abandoned Mineshaft we've expanded a bit upon already in different ways, like with Keeper. But one of the big things we're doing with like the dungeon reconstruction in general is kind of expanding the context of places. For example, the Pirate Cave, it's not just a bunch of wooden planks. It's an actual harbor with ships, with highlands and all of that. So in the future, we kind of want to make sure that all dungeons have that type of environmental storytelling. So that kind of expands in general to lore as well. So we don't have anything specific in mind for Abandoned Mineshaft, but it's definitely something we can and we'll probably do eventually once we get to touch the dungeon in more details again.
Yeah, I would just say just in general, more well-realized environments as we're doing with the current reworks. Obviously, this isn't the kind of game that lends itself well to something like full-on cutscenes, because that would kill the gameplay pace. You never want it to get in the way. The most position you'll find is with the Realm Eye, of course. But yeah, just telling more subconsciously throughout dungeons is what we want to do.
Fantastic. Going back to the UT exchange, somebody asked, spending gold / fame on UT exchange is to dismantle the UT, build UT, or both?
We've actually been taking a somewhat different approach to the system since we showed that initial like mock-up design in an old producer's letter. So the core system of dismantling then reassembling may not be one-to-one with what we showed there. Like we said, it was work in progress. We're still working out exactly where those sorts of costs and systems will come in. There will absolutely be free-to-play methods if that's the concern, but don't have any exact definite details that should be shared right now.
All right. In the last Q&A we did quite a while ago, the idea of a potion belt, which lets you change out your consumable slots for something other than HP and MP potions, was mentioned. Has there been any more discussion of implementing that on the developer side?
We're actually definitely investigating this in more detail. We don't have anything quite concrete, but we are very much liking that idea in general of, in a way, giving players a bit more agency in terms of consumables. So it won't be for monthly Mad God. I don't have an estimate for when we'll have more to share on this, but it's definitely something we're very much interested in. We're discussing internally.
Fantastic. Will you guys be changing out skins or purchase? This guy wants to buy some skins, but he doesn't like the current system where you have to pay for mystery backs and get a random quantity of shards. Instead, he wants to buy them from the Nexus shop. There is, of course, that right now, but of course, some skins aren't in the rotation for that. At least from what I know.
I think that question will be for Imser.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. Hi. So pretty much we right now have the AI, which is choosing which skins are in the rotation. So we hope that all skins actually should at some point be there implemented. But if you have some concrete skins in mind, we can definitely look into it. If you can give us the name, and we'll look into why it wasn't pushed. Some of the schemes are for sure themed in around Halloween or around Christmas, and those will not be in the rotation until the Christmas or Halloween or any other specific event, like also Independence Day and stuff like this. But other skins should all go through the rotation.
Fantastic. So there you go. Apparently they are there, except for like the themed ones. So we already talked about the whole stunning thing, how they might have a cooldown, right? We talked about that like the first question, and you guys said they having cooldown similar to how like even O3 will have a cooldown. This guy says, will most enemies or O3 for example be stunned without a cooldown? Like, I don't remember exactly what I said about the whole debuff cooldown for enemies, but are all enemies gonna have it, or just some enemies? Or
this is something that was into Vital Combat public testing, that after a lot of thoughts, we've decided to kind of put that idea on hold for now. So it won't be coming anytime soon, since there's a lot of enemies to go through, and there's a lot more little details that we need to finalize. So for now, we're not working on this anymore right now. So the general idea behind it is kind of try to get a more consistent system for status effects. That way, while we can't make all enemies, not immune, it would open up for a lot more design room for enemies that are currently immune, to be able to just give another use for knights, for archers, and all of that. That was kind of these design principles behind that change. But there was a lot of small little concerns that were brought up that made us kind of decide to wait. One of them, for example, was how electric pact would factor in it. So that's something we'll need to go back kind of to the drawing board, figure out those answers, and then we'll be able to share a bit more on how that would function.
oh, just real quick off topic, guys. If I do miss your question and don't like relate to the Deca GMs, just say it again. Give it some cooldown so you don't like spam it. But like I'm gonna go from bottom from most recent ones. So In the recent days, some of the Realm community may have been experiencing, the targeting of the crashing of servers, to stop certain groups from doing dungeons. Should we be concerned about this? Like last month, for this to be a thing like this month of Mad God, like we had the same issue in last month of Mad God for this.
So it's kind of, I would say attacks are always more on a case-by-case basis because they always exploit some flaws. It's a 10-year-old game. It's not the best architecture, so there's always some issues around it that can happen. In regards to this specific case, we've heard the reports and we're still investigating it. So we'll share more news once we've got solution to the issue, but we're looking into it.
Fantastic. Do you guys have any plans to develop outside of Realm to like develop a 3D game, for example?
I wouldn't say any current plans at the moment, at least nothing pertaining to Realm of the Mad God as a brand, I guess you could say.
All right. Sport, like I said, if I miss a question, just repeat it because there is quite a few questions, so I want to, make sure I get all of them. So if I miss it, just make sure to ask it again. You guys have any plans to not just straight out nerf pets, but perhaps add extra passive abilities like 10% extra healing or more damage when near pet?
So basically, just expand like the pet system in terms of ability, etc.
Mm.
That's something I'd personally really like to see eventually. The issue is, I think, there's a lot of like assumptions that were made when the pet system was made that makes it so the current way it's done. I don't think simply adding more abilities would be enough. Because let's be honest, how many people in here would actually trade their heal for damage ability?
Yeah.
It's no one, right? So I think it's something that will be a bit bigger and will kind of like restructure the system itself to take the current player behavior into account. So it'll be a much bigger project. It's something I'd really like to see because pets is kind of like it's a one and done system. You max your pet, you never look at it again. So I'd really like players to kind of pay more attention to them and care about them beyond just maxing one pet. So it's definitely something we're interested to do. It's just a matter of finding the right time for it.
All right. So I know we talked about this last the Q&A we did. Is mobile/console plan the future? We did talk about this, of course, last time, but there's people who want to know about it now, of course.
So mobile console is always kind of like a fun dream to talk about, but we don't currently have anything in the work on that front. We don't have anything to announce on that. But the hard part will always be BEM is a game that was very much made for PC, so a lot of the UI and the user experience is really made around having a mouse. So a big challenge would be for that to kind of port that to that experience to a controller. So there'd be a lot of design challenge on that front that would be really nice to eventually, be able to have REM on more platforms and have more people play the game. But currently, we'd rather focus on making sure the game is as good as it can possibly be on the existing platform it's on.
All right. So this is a big one. This guy's asking, can you guys please just split Vital Combat into Vital, Vit, and Wiz? You stubbornly repeat though. We don't want to add too many functions to Vit. But because you seem too afraid to nerf the base healing of Divine Pets, you make Vitality, lowering the timer cooldown of absurd Divine M heal, making Vit way better than Wiz at its own job.
So we've seen that feedback during the previous session. It's one of those things that adds additional, in a way, design challenge in a way, in how we want to approach the separate timer and in terms of balance and all of that. It's something that I think we might go back to eventually, but for now we want to really try tying it to Vit itself, and then separately focus on getting Wizmod on basically every class, and then as a step 2 in a way, we kind of check is Wiz still considered like efficient enough, or does it still need more purpose? And separating the system in two would be a lot easier once we've actually like seen the impact as um, even just with just VIT tied to it, see how much it actually affects the game. It's something that just in terms of, for example, builds and item balance, throwing wisdom into it suddenly makes a lot of classes have a much different impact. For example, most like rogue classes will be able to use much more easily spam their ability, which they already have a lot of mana for. Um, I think in the long term, it definitely will probably need another look at, and it's something that I want to stress regarding Vital Combat. Even when it will be out, it's not a one and done thing. We'll keep looking at it. We'll keep rebalancing it if necessary. It's a new gameplay system that's going to always be a core part of it going forward, and so we're always going to go back, improve it, rework it, or rebalance it if there's the need for it. The same way that we do for classes or for dungeons. So what's will be out on Monster Mad God is just the first iteration on it. So we'll keep working on it if necessary. If we see that something's too difficult or something that is too easily exploitable in the new mechanics, we'll make patches for that.
All
And
right.
that could include feedback such as splitting into two.
All right. So there's been a lot of questions about the Shadows rework, including the thought about like reworking the rings, which I think you guys have talked about before. Because as some of the rings are very much not really meaningful to the majority of the community. Every ring in the Shadows, in my opinion, isn't the greatest except for Crown. Is there any thoughts about like how long the Shadows rework is gonna take to get out, and your thoughts on reworking the rings as well?
Yeah, so to touch on the item thing first, a general policy with not so much a policy, but just a principle with design is usually items are one of the last things handled in the development process because you want to base it off of the near final product, the difficulty level, once most things decided. So that would be a very late decision as far as rework goes. Realistically, I would see not only adjusting the rings, but also probably adding a fair few additional UTs. I wouldn't go so far as to say like an entire set for each, but 3 UTs for one of the biggest in-game dungeons is pretty low by today's standards. After things like Lost Halls, Orcs of Sanctuary, even the Mine Shaft have definitely upped the expectations there. As far as the Shadows rework itself goes, that was one of the things considered to do earlier on, but we wanted to focus on something like Orcs 3 and now the early game dungeon reworks. I can't give an exact date; it's way too early to say out, but we'd like to start working on not just pre-production, but actually like starting to put it into the game sometime soonish, maybe towards the end of this year. And I'd absolutely like it to be a 2021 thing, hopefully the first half. That's not a definite, but that would be the hopeful plan, assuming things go as expected.
Fantastic. So I'm not really aware of this class myself. That's class is a bug. Sorry. When are you guys gonna fix the graveyard bug, which he think has to do with the ancient ruins completions?
That would be fixed with monthly Mad God update.
Look at that.
Yep.
Oh. Somebody gonna say something? Guess
Oh,
not.
I just confirmed.
At
Yeah.
Nexus. Oh, I almost died there. So someone wants to know what the Steam achievements and badges. When are you guys gonna fix, rework, and update them?
Oh, the Steve achievements where you get a White Star achievement at 65.
It's
That's a good
it's
question.
not something I believe we have a specific plan for, but
It's just something you do at some point.
we
Right?
we definitely need to take care of it at one point. Especially with all the new fame bonuses we'll be adding, it might also be a good time to actually start thinking of adding also new achievements on top. So I don't have a specific like estimate or plan for that, but it's definitely something we should take care of sooner rather than later. But we are aware of it for sure. Yeah.
A question about the UI in the bottom right, like the player list. It doesn't really like the who you have locked updates very slowly whenever someone like leaves or joins the dungeon. So is that gonna be fixed anytime soon? Because it is, it does take quite a while to lock people who aren't already on the bottom right. So.
That would probably just be part of continuing like UI polish updates over time. I'm not sure exactly when that'll get around to, but as we're, obviously the new client is well out of beta now. We've worked on a couple big features, but after this, we're going to have some time to do smaller polish stuff, especially on the visual and small functional side like that. So I would say hopefully within this year, but sometime soon.
Right. In terms of items, have you guys thought about adding any extremely exclusive items? There's a couple in the game, if I'm not mistaken, that don't come every season, like, the Halloween reskins, but only come once ever in Realm.
I think we have something like that from Off of the Mad God, unless I'm mistaken.
Oh. That.
Yep.
That's cool.
I mean, you never know because events get repeated sometimes, and there is people who didn't get to earn the items, so giving them a second chance is always a good thing in my opinion. Very limited items, maybe not UTs.
I also want to add, I think one of the big point why in general we've not been using super limited item too much and going more towards like available commonly and then super rare is because of the permadeath element of the game. Because if you have an item you can only get like for that one period, once you can no longer get, you're probably not going to use that item as much because you don't want to lose it. So it's usually what weights us towards more something like entropy rare, for example, where it's not available often and you need a lot of work towards it, but it's still like a pretty rare and powerful item. So
yeah, exactly.
But we've been doing some stuff as well for more as contest rewards, for example, like the Jade Beetle and the Abyssidal Trophy. So bad things I think we'll be doing here and there. So it won't be common, but I think when we find the opportunity for it, where we think we can reward players with something that's decently cool and that we feel they won't care to take it on their actual characters, so they won't, be sad they lose it, or we don't have to factor the permadeath too much, then we'll definitely go for it.
All right, fantastic. In terms of group dungeons, of course, you guys are currently making dungeons more accessible to smaller groups, but have you guys ever thought about adding like a looking for group feature into the game? Because currently, obviously, endgame dungeons such as Lost Halls, stuff like that, or they are very hard to complete and even like start up without discords. So, you guys ever thought about adding like a looking for group feature to have that in the game?
We're actually talking about something somewhat along those lines fairly recently. Sort of tied it more into our general idea that we want to expand more what guilds can do. Since right now it's a pretty underused feature, and in theory that should be one of the key ways to get parties to play with and accomplish big things together in fairly organized sessions without the use, like necessitating the use of Discord and other third-party stuff. So I would say a feature like that, whether it's strictly tied to guilds or not, would probably come alongside an expansion to the guild system.
All right. Are you guys in terms of trailers? Obviously, the current Rotmeg trailer is quite lackluster. You guys have been doing good with the trailers recently, but have you guys have any idea about reworking the current trailer for the game on Steam?
So we definitely saw a lot of positive reception to the latest one for Montmeg. We were very excited about that one ourselves. We're happy that it was received well. Given obviously the positive reception is probably a style we're going to continue going with, as we feel it turned out very well. I don't know about reworking the current one for the main game, but as more trailers get developed over time, that's probably what you'll see more prominently on things like the Steam page. So,
all right. Okay. This on Flash you could have auto fire on while typing, but in Exalt you stop firing when the chat window opens. You can even walk in a straight line while typing if you kept the key held down. Any chance of re-implementing this? It's frustrating to be completely petrified while trying to communicate with other players.
That goes in line with your previous answer. We're making UI improvement kind of it's more of like throughout the year kind of thing. So um, I think like if this is something that's bothering a lot more people, we get higher like priority. So if it's the kind of bug that really annoys you, or the kind of missing feature compared to Flash that really lowers the user experience, then you should make your voice known so we can really be sure like what most of the players actually are used to versus one use case that a few percentage of player are actually using, so we can prioritize the UI changes that benefits the majority of them.
All right. So we talked about the UT exchange a little bit in terms of the fame and gold of it, but is there any information that we have not heard yet that you can share as like an expected timeline for it? Will it be coming this year, next year, or anything like that? Any news you can share with us about it?
I would say almost definitely within this year. I mean, I'm always reluctant to say absolutely 100%, but
Sure.
it's very much looking that way. As far as details go, we're like the final steps of starting to like set stuff in stone as the feature gets developed, the UI's function, all that. It's a tad early for me to want to say anything in confidence. If it's like two weeks later, I'd probably say more. But
Fair.
yeah, we'll be giving more details on that though in announcements.
Fantastic. Somebody in chat saying, can you please do the realm rework in steps, like removing obstacles and raising drop rates first?
So RAM rework, it's something we want to do, but what I think you don't realize is how much of the RAM, like in terms of the code, is tying together. It's basically we need to kind of understand how everything is handled, and by that point, we'll be able to change so much stuff that it's better to package it at once and do it in step. However, for that drop rate comment, I would like to have some slight clarification if it's increase in specific items or if it's something alongside along the lines of dungeons and realms giving higher rates. And while I'm talking about drop rates, I do want to announce that we'll be rising the drop rates of a good portion of items throughout the game, including event whites for Monster Mad God.
Yeah, this was
Right.
something we alluded to earlier with Vital Combat, but as Vital Combat is added to the game plays differently, might be a bit more depth. We wanted to increase the reward side of things as well to basically keep the overall reward system of the game at a faster pace. So yeah, event whites won't have their pitiful drop rates anymore. A lot of dungeon whites will be higher. Just more rewarding in general as an offset to some of the increased dangers, especially in the end game.
Right. I've talked to you guys about this already, but Star Rewards. Is there any plans for these to come out at any point?
Star rewards?
Yeah, like
Like I said,
for different
you rank
stars
up.
you get different
Oh.
rewards for them. Character slots, vault chests, so on and so forth.
Yeah, a prerequisite to that would probably be a sort of family work where like getting the star corresponds to some meaningful amount of work, which like we don't really want to do anything with that until we have like a system of gaining fame that we're happy with, which is tied to the family work.
Yeah.
Star Wars themselves, maybe Kit knows a bit more. I don't think we have.
So we don't currently have any major plans regarding stars, but we have been discussing about the rank system in general, and I think beyond just giving rewards, we may even in the future, though nothing decided, change the system in a more, I want to say, broad way, as it's currently extremely simplistic in a way and doesn't give a lot of gold for player just obtaining fame. A character, even with more varied fame sources, with more fame bonuses, is still something that's not the most engaging goal for players. So if we touch the rank system, it's definitely something we should be thinking about. In a way, I guess it could be you could consider it a more, I want to say, easier version of exaltation in a way, where we would reward you for completing star quests. So it's something that really sounds good on paper, but there's a few more stuff we need to figure out before we get to implementing that. And as Yuna said, the first step for that will be making sure gaining fame is in a better state.
All right. In terms of runes, you guys have talked about runes a lot, obviously, in terms of drop rates, but currently, from what I've seen personally in running O3s, sword and helmet runes are the most obtained ones currently because they drop from more sought after dungeons and bosses over the shield rune. Is there any thoughts of reworking the drop rates for specific runes to make them higher or lower so O3s aren't just waiting forever to get a shield rune?
Yes, so there was actually a Reddit thread on this pretty recently I ended up responding to. So we've, as we said, been looking at the rune data all the time, seeing what it is, and everything we've seen shows that it's quite balanced. In fact, the shield runes are actually a bit more on the common side as far as overall player ownership. And we really believe that as far as the Discord struggles there, it's a product of shield runes primarily dropping in the realm. While they do technically drop in the court, that's not the best place to get them. So we're happy with the rates in general, but as far as accessibility to Orcs there goes, that is still something we're looking into because we know there's still some struggles with getting non-Discord runs, trying to just do it independently. Part of the things, I think we mentioned this before, is having times when certain runes are already available to you. And for example, we had that one weekend where there's just a chance of it opening.
Yeah.
And we want to do something like that on smaller scales, like this weekend, you don't need a sword rune or something like that. So
just to specify, that's an example, not this specific.
Yeah.
yeah.
Just in case.
To
Yeah,
clarify,
this weekend,
that's not
guys.
saying we're doing exactly that. I'm saying as an example.
Yeah, for sure. So with the in-air comic system coming very soon, about a week, is there any thoughts of reworking sick and pet states and stuff like that to make it more fair for people who struggle a little bit more with that sort of thing, even with pets?
So that's a case-by-case basis. We've been reducing the duration of some of the sick in some of the most egregious places. For example, Dama or Gemsbog has got some slight sick duration lowered, but it's something that will be an ongoing effort of updating content to fit even better than at launch. So we'll be looking at feedback once the system fully releases and like what areas causes more issues than others, and be making some adjustments. Pet stasis, currently we're not going to be changing too much, but it's even though some people might think that it's similar to just vital combat in general, it has a different impact on players. First off, you lose stuff like electric, which is a pretty good paralyze ability, but also just losing your entire healing is completely different from a reduced version of it. So we'll be possibly also adjusting pet stasis in some places where it doesn't feel necessary, but some places have it for a reason, and it's designed around it. So it's I can't give you a blanket answer there. It's really very much a case by case basis depending on the fight and the difficulty we're intending for that specific fight. While I was on status effect, there is one thing I want to kind of announce because I think it will make some people happy, but for Marble Colossus, we've decided to remove blind from the rotation of status effects that the rocks, pillars, etc. can use. So you will no longer run into that issue. All the other status effects are still present, but blind will no longer appear.
That is very good to hear from you, actually. So rifts. This is of course a feature that we had quite a while ago. Will rifts be coming back anytime soon? Have you guys just abandoned it because it wasn't perceived too well by the community or anything like that?
We don't have any current plans for rifts. The infrastructure isn't even fully into Exalt. It could be revisited as a very long-term thing, and I mean very long-term, but as of now, there's plenty more on the development side we want to do for the base game, and we don't feel resources would be well spent doing more short-lived rift seasons.
Yeah, one thing we really noticed from Rift was how the game was kind of, I won't say, not in the state that it could support that kind of game mode on the long term. It's something we've really started working towards. For example, dungeon reconstruction is one example of that, and trying to make the just overall RAM experience just feel more complete, feel more consistent, and those kind of things. There's a lot of work yet to be done there. For example, the entire RAM, that's a lot of stuff to work on. But maybe once we've kind of stabilized the game in a place that we're really happy with, we will probably start thinking again on, is it possible to sustain a seasonal game mode in those circumstances. So it's not never ever coming back, but it's not anytime soon if it does.
All right. So with upcoming Fame bonus rework, so he wants to know what will happen to mundane / boot characters after the Fame rework. Will there be a legacy Fame bonus, or do we need to commit seppuku, as they say, on said characters?
So we will not be carrying Boots on the Ground, Mundane, Thirsty, Friends of the Cube, those restrictive bonuses that you can lose out of. The decision was made mostly because those bonuses kind of, the way the forces you to play in a way that's just against what the game is about, and it just does not really require a ton of proper gameplay. In a way, it forces you kind of to just go for the safest possible way to play the game, rather than try to take risk and experience as much of the content as possible. So regarding characters, while those specific bonuses won't be there, we are trying to keep as much of the stats your character as possible. There's some that we would not be able to carry over due to specific reasons here and there, but what we're trying to do is, and that's for legendary character, but just general characters in general, we're going to be trying to translate as much of your current stats into the new bonuses as possible. So it's something you will have to keep in mind. We'll have more info later on the specifics, but we'll let the decision of whether to keep your character as is or to kill it to get that fame up to you. But we will make sure to provide more information on the fame rework in the future so that you can make the informed decision on your own.
Right. So of course there is a handful of the beginner dungeons right now being reworked with Month of Mad God. Will Forbidden Jungle eventually be receiving a rework? Because apart from Hive, it seems to be the only beginner dungeon that will not be getting a rework right now.
So one of the things when we started basically drafting the reconstruction stuff a couple months ago, was basically evaluating all of the current dungeons and assigning a priority to them, in terms of how badly they needed to be brought up to speed. So obviously stuff like Pyre Cave, Abyss, stuff that was just way below visual and gameplay standards up the top. And Forbidden Jungle, by contrast, has pretty okay art, pretty varied balance. It's not incredible, but it was okay as it was. And one thing I want to mention along with all of this is that while Montmeg is themed after reconstruction, that doesn't mean this is the only burst of it we'll be doing.
Yeah.
We'd like to continue to do some remakes and reworks post Montmeg just continuously over time, even if this is the biggest batch of them. And Forbidden Jungle will probably be involved in that. I don't know if it will be as huge of a complete overhaul like stuff like Pirate Cave is, but that will probably see some changes sooner or later.
Hey, let's look at one next. Good question. Before the Fame rework is released, will there be a way to exchange the Fame for items in like a Fame box or anything like that people have worked quite hard for to, of course, build up a lot of Fame, and since the value of Fame is going to change for sure, will there be a way to spend your current Fame that you do not need and want to get your value out of that you spend your time on to get?
I can't say anything specific, but we will probably have some ways a little prior to the Fame rework release to burn existing stuff. We'll have an announcement on this pretty soon about how to prepare for it all, since the Fame bonuses aren't all being like grandfathered in. But yeah, we know since the value will change, all of the scope will change. Like numbers that were once very high won't actually mean much anymore. So we'll try to have something that people can do with that value before it goes away.
All right. So drop rates. We spoke about this a little bit last Q&A. Do you have any plans for releasing actual drop rates for everything? You guys mentioned about upgrading them, but will you actually release some? Because in other games this is a non-issue, and it's a good place for devs to be transparent. And it's weird that this game doesn't have public drop rates. If you don't plan on showing drop rates, why?
We don't plan to release drop rates at the moment. I would say it's a never say never kind of thing, but as of now, we want to, as mentioned before, buff all, well, not all, but most of the drop rates in the game to make it more rewarding in general, establish what we feel our rates we're confident in and feel balanced throughout the game, assess the randomization in general, and from there, we'll probably think about it again.
All right. This is a pretty basic question, but people keep asking about this. Key servers. Why have you guys been shutting them down? Pretty basic question.
I think Aimsar knows that one best.
Can you repeat?
In terms of other P servers that you guys have been shutting down, why have you been shutting them down? Obviously, you can't speak too much about it, most likely, but
Pretty much, we are shutting down servers which start making money out of our intellectual property, and always this is the point where we start taking some action in terms of if we are doing something about P servers or not.
All right. The chat filter. Obviously, the chat filter has some issues. And some things can get by pretty easily. Will there any plans to rework the chat filter? Because myself personally, when I'm streaming, people like to spam very bad things to me when to just disrupt my stream. So I would have to turn off chat when I'm streaming a lot of times.
That's been a point of... Sorry, go ahead.
Bad.
Right. That's been a point of discussion recently, especially like post Flash and everything. Again, it's another thing where I can't get specific details, especially because I'm not personally very involved in it. But that is something we know is in need of improvement.
All right. Of course, there is a slight change to trading right now. That's planned. The backpack trading. Are there any other plans to adjust or change trading to make it more niche in the game instead of having it entirely player decided?
Not entirely sure I understand what they mean by
Neither
more
do
niche
I.
and not player decided.
I think they mean like set like a hard economy for certain items, maybe.
Like sort of like NPC trading with fixed prices, I guess.
Does UT Exchange count as that? Guess not.
Probably not, because that's like white bag stuff like that. This more
Yeah.
like non-sub items.
Just like in general for any item.
I think it's not something we'd be really like doing. We don't really like to get too hands-on on that. Trading is one of the few social aspects of the game that really is just fully within players' hands, and it's one of the aspects that I really admired the game for back in the day, where people would kind of just like try to scam each other in terms of even just price guides, just misleading to control the market. Those kind of things were exciting. There's a lot of social construct you can make from that.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm not saying you should do it. That's a bad thing, but it's interesting the kind of dynamics. And even if I remember correctly, the old Prifox devs that were all dev conference talk about like how runs trading like evolved into something they did not expect at the time. So it's an aspect of the game that I think is very important, and we don't want to really control too much and let players decide on how it should be handled.
Very, very fair. On the topic of trading, this question asks if you guys managed to fix duping. I'm gonna say when you guys managed to fix duping. Will you guys have any plans to unsoulbound stuff like white bags and STs and everything like that?
That's probably too far out to say, given how many implications that kind of decision has.
Yeah.
Especially since at that point, when duping is fixed for good, item forge will be out for a while then, and we'll first want to see how the UT Exchange item forge is being utilized, how it's evolved since then. There'll probably be some changes, and see what kind of need there really is for UT trading directly versus mainly sticking to that system.
Very fair.
The one thing it will absolutely do is put the option on the table, which isn't really right now. There's a lot of like small stuff that are soulbound that could also be opened up for trading in general if duping was not a thing. So it's not something we can just answer right here and then, but it definitely is something we would discuss instantly if the option
Yeah, like
available.
to be honest, runes are one major thing that we would really love to have tradable, but
Yeah.
don't feel comfortable doing it right now given the vulnerabilities.
Sure.
But yeah, that would be a great thing to do.
Yep. So this is a pretty simple question. With the map render bug, is there a plan to to fix it, like how it doesn't equal render the exact same on every side, or yeah, right now it has one more tile to the left than to the right, apparently.
Render.
Like the mini map?
No, like
no, he means like the character, the
Fog
circle
of War,
around.
Oh,
like,
the focus.
yeah, the Fog of War, yeah.
I guess I would basically just follow in the same answer with the UI.
Yeah.
So we need to polish maybe eventually. So no specifics. It might already be in our backlog, but there's a lot of things to prioritize. So it's hard to give you a specific answer on that one. But we will definitely look into it, as you pointed out, and check if we already have it in our backlog or not.
Alright, this person has noticed that there is issue with abilities that allow you to use or require pinpoint access on your cursor. For example, with the wizard spell, your spell seems to target precisely where your cursor is, but in the middle of a tile. Is there any plans to fix this? This would be a huge quality of life update for wizards.
I don't believe it's been discussed much, to be honest, since that's been the same pretty much since the wizard first existed, locking onto the center of tiles. If we do not a full-on wizard rework, but some sort of change to that class in the future, that might be something to bundle in with it, depending on what kind of implications we think it has, but nothing specific right now.
And while it would definitely be a good quality of life, it does have some balance implications. It increases your damage output if you're to more consistently hit. So it's definitely something that we need to think about, but that's a good suggestion. Definitely will investigate whenever we touch a wizard.
With people hacking this game, because of course people do hack, is there any concrete plan to detect and ban such auto-ban hackers in all aspects of the game instead of just in the recent ban wave with people doing O3 and Flash?
Yeah, so this is something that in Light of Exalt we're continually improving, and we know that's not always visible on the player side. We understand there's a lot of frustrations there, as much as we are also trying to ban as many cheers as possible. It's by necessity kind of a behind-the-scenes thing. It's not something we can shout from the rooftops and say super happily all the time, which we know leads to kind of less satisfaction. But it is something that we are constantly doing, constantly adding more tracking for. Again, as Flash is gone, that's a lot of vulnerabilities gone right there. And continuous anti-cheat and detection will keep happening.
All right. So this person wants to know about the current support. Is there any plans to improve the current support? Right now, a lot of players I know Get a completely random or unjustified ban for offensive language. You can't appeal it because you get the same standard replies all the time. It shouldn't be the case that when support missing its purpose, you need to make a highly upvoted Reddit post, the worst support you will ever see when you have an actual issue.
We've actually been expanding our support team by a handful of people recently to help accommodate the increased amount of tickets. Lately, there's been a lot of strain for various reasons. First, it was when people had to transfer from Congregate, we gave that top priority, which sucked up a lot of support time because we knew that absolutely had to be done as soon as possible. And after that, there was handling off the band wave. That was very time consuming. So it's been tough for support to just get into a regular rhythm where they can treat every ticket pretty much the same way. But we're getting back to that. There's actually been, even just today, really efficient numbers in terms of tickets getting responses and handles and successfully getting through it. So we hope that's something that people will feel the improvement with over time.
All right. So obviously the potion chest is coming soon. How will the monetization work for that? Are slots tied to the normal vault, or are they a separate upgrade?
They are separate. I believe Aimzer can probably provide specific details on how they're acquired.
Yep, they are completely separate for the current vaults that you have. So current vaults will get the new UI, but whatever you had in them and however how much you had space in them will stay. This is something completely separate. You will start with additional 16 slots for pots, and it doesn't matter which kind of pots, the total amount of 16, which you can then increase to 64 by just upgrading it for 500 gold. Then another 500 gold will provide you the 128 spots, and one more upgrade will provide you 256 spots for any pots you want.
Fantastic. Will the prices for each tier be static, or will they go up for each tier, how much it costs to upgrade?
Each one is 500 gold.
That is actually fantastic. In terms of opacity, right now it is of course capped at 50% unless you go into your reg edit. Is there any plans to lower it in game, or are they going to keep it flat at 50%?
That's something we took a look at after release. We know there are some people who had initially wanted the lower percentage, and we didn't end up including that at the time. We may revisit it to offer lower levels, but we want to be careful in terms of how it affects the gameplay, having people at 25 or even 0%. So we'll probably want to have something that caters to better performance when we consider that a second time.
Right. Battle of the Nexus, not a very seen dungeon right now, but will the key of it ever be able to be obtained again? Like, will it be really reintroduced into the game, and will it be updated as well?
So Battle of the Nexus is a very special dungeon in our eyes. We'll make it available from time to time as we've done in the past, but we will rarely update it because simply we think of this dungeon as kind of like being stuck in September 2013 because that's kind of the point of it. So updating it kind of is a bit weird in our eyes. It's supposed to represent a historic event, so modernizing it in any way would kind of take away from that. So we'd like to keep it kind of how it was, and you can just enjoy running that content. And as the game gets modernized more and more, it will make the dungeon even more special because it might be the only time you'll be able to, for example, replay, let's say, the old version of Steno now that she'll have a few upgrades. So it's very much, eyes of relic of the past, and we consider that it should stay that way as much as possible.
Yeah, I would say the extent of updates there would be like standardization stuff, like HP scaling.
Yeah.
That's not something that really impacts the intent of the experience. It's just keeping it up to date. One only other thing would probably be drop rate buffs to the vanity weights, which will almost certainly come with Vital Combat, since they are quite low for a dungeon that is not at all accessible.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So in terms of your vault and the potion storage coming out soon, of course there is character slot coupons and vault slot coupons. Will there be a similar thing released into the calendar for the potion storage, or is it going to be purely pay?
We don't have any immediate plans for it. Ames, are we gonna say something?
Yep, same as you.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. That is very fair. So, the performance of Exalt, is something I struggle with personally, actually, even, when I'm streaming. Is there any, plans to optimize it? I assume there is always plans to optimize, but, can we assume to see anything soon-ish about, it running a little bit better and smoother? Because right now, sometimes it can be laggy in O3s and stuff like that sometimes.
Yeah, so that kind of goes under the same principle as what we have with the UI changes in terms of we're not going to promise one grand patch that is life changing, but
Yeah.
over time, every other update or so, we want to keep adding those small improvements because that's generally how just maintaining a client ends up going. So yeah.
All right. In terms of abilities on classes, will you guys ever rework the general function of an ability type? Night Stun is extremely unbalanced to be able to apply to bosses, even with a cooldown, so all bosses have to be immune to not get crippled, making them bad in tons of classes like Knight, and priests have abysmal skill ceilings compared to something like Mystic.
So that was in the older version of Vital Combat with the cooldown on like stun immunity, for example. The idea there was allowing us to make more bosses stunnable, but without making them perm stunnable, because chain stunning is generally what makes it truly broken. A stun on its own is just a 3-second window of opportunity, but a perma stun, as that person mentioned, can just completely break a boss like O2.
Yeah.
Now, as mentioned previously, for those who weren't here, we're not moving forward with that at the moment in terms of the status effect immunity. May revisit it later, but for now, we want to measure just the effects of Vital Combat more directly. And then, as Kid mentioned, on a case-by-case basis, try to evaluate how to allow knights and other arguably broken status effects to have a value without it being so black and white between useless and horribly overpowered.
Very fair. So this is about Month of Mad God. Is there any information that has not been leaked yet that we can expect to see? Is there going to be the calendar be coming out soon and stuff like that?
We're going to have announcements on it very soon in terms of more details with what to expect. The bulk of it was in that trailer. We tried to show as much as possible there. But the smaller details, like a calendar for the month, that will be coming out soon, so you know more precisely what to expect.
Fantastic.
Also, I'd say we probably only have time for one more question at this point. So,
Okay. Find a good one. Good question. What a beach I don't die. Okay, so I'm trying to find a good one. End it off. Okay. Is there? No, that's not a good one. Lost about the this one. Where was it? I lost it. That's going too fast. So the early game visually looks like it's being reworked right now. Some phases are gonna be reworked, but the early game, in my opinion, needs to be reworked more than just dungeons and experience and stuff like that. So is there any plans to rework the entirety of the early game? Because right now it is basically you play early game and you somehow get the late game. There's no real like definitive progression in it.
yes. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so there's a clear lack of guide towards the transition from early to late game, where the game currently still points you once you've achieved level 20, go hug this little cube god and you'll probably get blasted to death. Something we definitely want to change eventually. It's probably something that will be more closely tied to RAM rework, since the RAM structure also causes some issues. But we also want to make some improvement slowly on that. In particular, with Monthly Mad God, there will be some adjustments to a few RAM enemies. In particular, Grey Blobs, for example, will actually have a telegraph before they explode. So as a new player, you don't just get instantly destroyed. Another part that was adjusted was the Highlands. We've lowered the amount of spawns in general there. We've made them give more consistent XP, have them feel more like using actual movement patterns, bullet patterns, rather than just assault you all at once. So the Highlands should be much less of a blocker as well for new players. So we're slowly making this kind of change, and we really want to make the early game clearer, but it requires a bit more thought and a bit more resources in terms of actual implementation. So it's something that will eventually come, but for now we want to do things kind of like one step at a time, with changing those dungeons, tweaking rates on a lot of things. And the thing we're doing to make it much more new player friendly is we are introducing um, a new, I want to say, part to the load system, and that's the ability for us to actually
Ah, yes.
bias the load towards the class you're playing. That means it's something would for now only apply to the early game. So we want to make sure it works properly. We want to test it and see its impact, but it should make it so, for example, when you're making a priest and you're leveling up, you don't spend 5 minutes killing a bunch of level 5 quests to
Yeah.
get a tome. So that should make the progression throughout the realm a lot smoother as well. You'll be able to progress faster, you'll be able to obtain the equip that you want, and the big blockers in terms of enemies should be a lot softer. So overall, that's one part that will improve for Monster Mad God, and we definitely make more changes in the future as well.
All
One
right.
small thing I'd like to add about the just general tiered progression on top of the class bias to help you get items you can actually use. One thing we're doing alongside the dungeon reworks is kind of evaluating the purpose of each boss's loot pool. And in addition to a couple more UTs to help people in the early game, we're also kind of gearing each of the early game dungeons towards a certain point of progression. And for one example of this, the forest maze right now, Mama Megamoth. We added a guaranteed tier 1 ability to her with a high chance of the second one, as well as a good chance of tier 2 ability. So basically, you get like 3 abilities there, and hopefully one towards your class. Pirate Cave, for example, is also geared towards weapons, and then Spire Den with armor, that sort of thing. So in general, trying to make those dungeons valuable for people who want to keep themselves going and not fall behind in the tier system.
All right. Fantastic. Well, unfortunately, like they said, that's all the time they have. They are very busy people. Okay, I have to ask this real quick because it's a very quick thing. It's getting spammed to hell. Future Q&As, are they gonna be happening soon?
Yes, hopefully during Montmeg. It's been tough to find the time with everything going on development-wise. Setting aside like 2 hours or so for one of those Discord Q&As can be tough to work out. But after the bulk of the Montmeg stuff is released, we have a bit more of a calmer period getting back to things. We'd like to make those more regular again.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for hanging out.
Thank you very much.
Doing it with
So-
us.
So everyone,
Yes.
and see you at Monster Mad God. We're really excited about everything we've got in store for you. So I hope you'll enjoy it as much as we enjoyed making it.
All right. Well, thank you all again. I'm gonna go keep streaming, and next for the Q&A, boys.